Hello, everyone. Welcome to Member Attribution, First Steps to Value-Based Care. If you are here for Michael Westover, I am so sorry to disappoint you. I have taken his place. Hello. He is in the audience, though. My name is Semira Singh. I lead payer-provider interoperability at Providence. It's wonderful to have you all here.
And joining Semira, my name is Gurbinder Singh. I'm a product manager leader at Humana, leading innovation and compliance portfolio. And just as a disclaimer, it's a Singh and Singh, but there's no family connections, at least what we know of.
Although I'm sure we look very similar.
Yes.
All right, perfect. Obligatory slide, antitrust. You see it, read it, take a moment. We are good to move forward. Okay, so if you're sitting here saying, what the heck is ATR or member attribution? You're in the right spot. Let's talk about it. So, but before we do, maybe we give a little bit of background about Providence and what we do and why this is important to us and so forth. And can you all hear me okay? Yes? Okay, perfect. So a little bit up? Maybe like this? Okay, a little too tall for the podium. All right. So Providence is a large multi-state health system. We have 51 hospitals. We have north of 150 value-based care contracts. We get member attribution files or member assignment files for 102 of those contracts. We have rosters, so member attribution rosters that come in 68 different formats. This is because in the state of current interoperability, most things are done on a proprietary basis. We have 10 technology vendors that we send attribution to, meaning that when we get data from our payer partners, we ingest that, we normalize it, and then we send it to various analytic vendors that do something else with that data, right? Services that we purchase from them. We have one EMR that currently ingests the data in a proprietary format. You all are probably familiar with that. And then we currently have 3 payers that are super standards focused, super innovative, and they send us member attribution data in ATR, which is the member attribution implementation guide that fits the FHIR criteria or uses FHIR as a standard. So as it pertains to roster structures, there's a few examples of different ways that we get this data. We could receive a snapshot, meaning who is enrolled at this point of time when we're generating the file. We receive separate member rosters for each year of eligibility. We could get 1 record per member, 1 record per member per month, 1 record per year, data for the entire span of the contract, just lots of different variations. And again, that's all pointing back to the fact that the way that this information is shared without leveraging standards is very proprietary, right?
Just to add to what Semira was saying, if I can chime in.
It's not on. Closer.
What Semira was saying, I like to say this thing, it's not a data problem. All of us, we are drowning in this data, right? She was talking about 62 formats. And, all right, I'll try to speak louder, maybe that's why I was there. But anyways. All right. Hopefully this is better. So I was just trying to say, at this stage, this is not a data problem, right? All of us, we are drowning in data. Providence is getting data into 62 formats, different vendors, different things like that. What matters is sending the data in an actionable format where somebody can take that data and design a workflow around it, which is actionable and doable. So just wanted to kind of highlight that from our side. Totally different side of the problem is we are supporting hundreds of different file formats. We are trying to support every file format a health system is looking for, SFTP, technology, file transfers, and things like that. But that being said, we want to stop doing that. So sorry, Samira, back to you.
That was perfect. This just isn't a very ideal setting. Can you all hear them? Yeah, okay. So we will try to enunciate and project. Great. So on to the next component. What does ATR do? We've already established that ATR stands for member attribution. It is a standard way to exchange enrollment data, right? And it gives you a few different pieces of information. For example, what populations belong to what group or what value-based care contract, which providers and care teams have been attributed or assigned to each member, which organizations does that member belong to. That could be a large hospital system, a clinic, right, a specific provider, depending on the attribution or assignment methodology. And then for what periods were they covered? What periods were they covered with the health plan versus what periods were they attributed to you specifically? What periods were they assigned to you for care, right, as a clinician or as a health system? And then other components included are patient demographics and so forth. And so if you're sitting here and you're saying, okay, I care about value-based care, I know my health system cares about it, or if you're a vendor, your customers care about it, what is member attribution going to do? And why do I care to invest in technology that will give me one piece? Right, one piece of this massive pie that you really truly care about that has a big impact on your bottom line. Well, in our standards-based community, we say that member attribution is the baseline for everything, right? It is the starting point for bidirectional data exchange between a payer and provider. It is essentially how you start building out your interoperable ecosystem as it pertains to value-based care. So it allows you to patient match, especially for other use cases. It could be a list of anything, really. Your value-based care contract, but members that belong to a specific population. You take that, you can match patients to clinical data so that you can send out quality measures. You have the ability to anticipate what clinical data the payer can send to you, right? If you follow regulation, you know that PDEX or the provider data, the payer data, clinical and claims are going to be exchanged starting in 2027 for Medicare Advantage programs and those covered under CMS's umbrella. So it's a starting point for that, so you know what you can anticipate. You can use it for other clinical use cases and so forth. And the magic with FHIR is that you build your ecosystem, you build this baseline, right? And then you reuse, recycle. You may have a different profile for quality or risk adjustment or whatever it may be, but that underlying data persists across the board. Anything? All right. So takeaway here, ATR is extremely important. It is easy. It is your first step, but it is the gateway towards other use cases. Yes? All on board? Awesome. Okay. So this is a little bit of an expansion on that, and I won't go into too much detail. We only have 20 glorious minutes together, and that includes Q&A. But just to hone in on one component here, we talked about patient matching, and if you're getting enrollment data in multiple different formats, right, you have to normalize that data. And it's going to take you a really long time to normalize that information before you can do anything with it. If you're getting data in flat files, CSVs, Excels, through email, SFTP server, all these other things, you need to be able to support that infrastructure, and it's a lot more difficult if you have so much variety, from data consistency to cadence to how you get it and so forth. And even if you have that data, if it is incomplete and it doesn't have the required information to patient match, your match rates will not be very high. You always err on the side of caution, right? And so what other health systems, there's an example there from Multicare, have done or have proven is by implementing ATR as a standardized way to integrate enrollment data into their system, they've been able to patient match with higher accuracy. And that again goes back to that if you have a standard and you have a set of FHIR resources or any resources, right, and data elements, and those elements mean something specific with every payer, provider, vendor that implements it, then you know exactly what to expect. You know exactly how to integrate the data. You also know how to validate it against a specific specification and not one that you have to build yourself. So takeaway here, standards rule across the board, but especially with a use case like this, right? If you do not leverage something that has been standardized, that has been tested by the community, you're going to keep supporting brittle processes that will continue to break.
One of the things I would like to add here in the last thing is, on the last slide is, in terms of, from payer's point of view, we want to enable health systems with more data, information, how to close more gaps, what needs to be done to achieve those value-based targets. But we cannot do that. Most of the time, it is we want to share information for the patients who have an appointment, but most of the biggest opportunities lies with patients who might not have an appointment. How to bring those patients inside for those appointments with their PCP, how to close those gaps and things like that. And right now, we are sharing that information just by assumption that this member is attributed to this provider. Provider most of the time does not even know that this member is attributed to them in a lot of those cases. So that's what we want to change, and higher match rate solves a lot of those problems. Thank you.
All right. So how can FHIR standards make a provider's life easier? I am so guilty of skipping ahead. We talk about this stuff all the time, so you will see that some of the stuff that's on the screen I just mentioned. But let's rehash it because it's so important. And if you walk away from this thinking, man, I really need to reach out to Semira and GB and figure out how to get involved, that's a win, right? Okay, so how does ATR in general improve the process or make the interaction between payers and providers easier? Well, first, it's going to reduce ingestion burden. Remember, we talked about proprietary formats and how for every single format you have to normalize the data, read the data dictionaries, build your own mapping mechanism, and so forth. You don't have to do that. If you have a single format across the board, you're getting that information, you're validating it against reference implementation, you're good, right? You know what to expect month after month or whatever the decided upon cadence is. It makes the process less brittle. You have version control. You have a standard way to exchange the data. You're not managing SFTP servers on top of everything else. It makes negotiations easier. And I think this is so important, so we should talk about this in a little detail. If you are a provider or a payer, you know that when you're signing a value-based care contract, and if you're not doing this, you should, you go back and forth for a while, right? And you say, okay, we have a contract. Here's the kind of contract it is. Pay for performance, pay for reporting, upside, downside risk, whatever it may be, right? And part of that process, you should be saying, hey, payer, what kind of data do I need to send you? What am I on the hook for? And then the inverse is also true. What are you going to send me that will allow me to have insight into who the patient population is, where they're getting their care if it's outside of my health system, what kind of costs are they incurring, right? So that I have the opportunity to reach out and change things and be extremely proactive. And that process of advocating for the kind of information that you need, that back and forth can take a long time. Whether it goes into your direct contract, into a data addendum, it's done in parallel some other way. If you leverage member attribution as the standard, you do not have to do that. You do not have to maintain your own data addendum. You have the ability to say, hey, Da Vinci published this great implementation guide. It's been validated by HL7. It's a standard in the industry. Let's use this. And what that does is it automatically reduces any friction, any miscommunication between you and that payer, and creates understanding in the kind of information that you'll be receiving from them. Creates understanding in how you both identify patients and how you're going to get data regarding those patients so that you understand if they're attributed or assigned to you for what duration, what clinic, organization, etc. So that negotiation process and streamlining it is a really big deal. Also reducing data lags. So I think you can think of data lags in two ways. One, how often do you get the data? If you have an interoperable system that supports the production of member attribution data and you can share it regularly, you don't have to share data on a monthly basis. You can go in weekly, daily, whatever the two of you agree on. But more importantly, if you have a standard way to validate that data every single time it comes in, right, it's going to speed up your ingestion process. Because what happens right now is if a payer or vendor or whoever has a proprietary process, there's an analyst somewhere, we love analysts, that's producing the files on a monthly basis. They're either auto-dropping it to some sort of SFTP server or going and copying and pasting, dragging the file, right? There's maybe a mistake because they made an update to their code and now you receive the file and you're going, hey, this file doesn't have a tax ID number. What am I going to do? How am I streamlining it? Et cetera, right? You're not doing that here because it's a standard format. You can build your process to validate as soon as that data hits the front door, and then you have a feedback mechanism to the payer. So what that means for you is you have an opportunity for more timely data, right? Which means that if you're a provider and you're doing outreach, you can do that in more real time, right? But you also have a better way to be able to validate that data and ensure that it's data that you're expecting that you can use, that you can integrate into your downstream processes and so forth. And then again, and very importantly, if you're saying, okay, member attribution, fine, it's a roster, remember that this sets the foundation for growth. You start with member attribution, you go to clinical data exchange, risk adjustment, financial performance, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Thing what Semira said, right? Those were all the benefits from the provider side. What are the benefits on the payer side, right? So attribution data is a big problem on the payer side, right? We want to help those providers. We want to help those members also, but it is always backwards looking. A member went to a particular provider back in the day, and that's what we think that PCP is, and we keep doing that again and again every year. So from our side, what we want to do is, if you can go to the next slide, if you don't mind. Sorry. in our way, we want to scale this product, right? We want to give one format to all of the health systems so that we are not changing this information again and again. Some health systems are requiring this data after 15 days, some are requiring after 30 days. How can we support those health systems by giving them more accurate data? And what Semira keeps saying is integration with other services. The whole premise of value-based care is based on a member attribution. If member attribution is not correct, providers will never meet those targets. Payers will never meet those targets. We keep missing those risk adjustment and quality gaps because we are comparing ourselves against the attribution. So we need to change that. This also promotes innovation. So there is a difference between attribution process and roster management. What we want to do is use this as a core, and then we want to build a bidirectional roster management system with Providence and other health systems. What that means is it should be able to, in real time, a provider should be able to say, we do not accept this member. We try to get this member in for an appointment, but we are not able to do that. Right now, there is no such process exists outside of those Excel files. So we want to change that. The last one is scalability, right? So we want to scale this information by allowing giving this information directly to the health systems, EMR companies, and ACOs also, and we are talking to them, right? And we can't do that with Excel files and provider portals and things like that. So looking forward to that.
Again, if you're sitting here saying, this is so great, but who is doing this? Here are a few companies you can connect with. Please feel free to reach out. If you have questions, if you're starting on your interop journey and you don't know exactly what to do or what your options are, always please feel free to reach out. Anna Taylor, who's with Multicare, who's on the screen, is back there, has a very famous saying. She says, if we're the only ones doing this, then it really doesn't matter. So please get involved. All right, I will not go through every single piece here, but in general, the data diagram or the data flow and how this works, right? So you have a producer, which is typically a payer, could be a provider as well. Remember early on, we mentioned you may want to send attribution data to your vendor partners. So you have a producer, they create the ATR bundle, they expose it to a provider or whoever the consumer is, right? They look at that data, they integrate it, validate it, and then they do one of two things. They can say, yes, this is great, great for the month or great for the moment. I will integrate it, pass it through my downstream processes, or perhaps there's something wrong and you need to go back and forth. You can provide that feedback and say, let's make some changes. And then you typically go in this circle, right? I think in an ideal world, if patients just chose a single health plan and they stuck with it and everything was perfect and our lives were amazing, right? We can do this once, set it and forget it for the year. But the reality is there are a lot of changes that happen regularly. Patients, depending on the type of health plan, may change from month to month. And so you go through this process very regularly with a payer. Where this is better than the proprietary process is it's a lot more streamlined, so you have the opportunity to call out those differences really quickly versus having to, data map, integrate, normalize, and then you're a month in going, hey, that list we got last month wasn't accurate. What do we do now, right? So streamlining, innovation, integration really quickly, actionable insights is really what you get through this process. That's it. Okay, so we mentioned that bidirectional loop. So currently what is supported by most of our organizations is that the consumer produces data, the producer produces data, they send it over to the consumer ingests it, and it goes around again, right? But something that the group that's working on this implementation guide has been working on is an automated way to provide that feedback mechanism, not just as it pertains to, did you get what you expected, but also as it pertains to, are these members yours? GB mentioned this early on. What could happen is you could have a patient that has a PCP, sees them regularly, they go to an ED while they're on vacation, and all of a sudden they're on your list, and you're sitting there going, oh my gosh, that was a massive charge, they're not mine, right? So having a bidirectional process for that feedback loop to be able to close those inconsistencies without waiting for that meeting, waiting for that joint operating committee, whatever it may be, to call this out, it's a pretty big deal, right? And also having just a standardized way to provide that feedback is also pretty major, because right now in most of our conversations, it's just at some point after the period, we're going, hey, that member that had claims totaling $1 million, they really weren't ours. Can you go back and reconcile this? So there is a better way.
All right. Any questions?
And we might be over time,
Yes.
but just really quickly, please get involved. We can't say this enough, especially if you're a provider, vendor, payer, whatever it may be, right? Reach out, ask how you can attend. There are community calls, there are Da Vinci calls. We're happy to meet with you, whatever it may be. It's just important that we as a collective community get involved, that we have these conversations together, and that we continue to move things along, right?
Thank you for saying that, Semira. No, absolutely. Thanks for saying that. And that is very important. And we are ready to share whatever we have learned. Everybody does not need to go through the painful process, right? So happy to share those insights. All right. With that being said, any questions?
So payers are coming in and out of systems all the time. You have one that's coming out of a market, and their members have to be assigned, especially in a government book of business. Are there, under the financial management aspects of this, one, a forecasting and predicting where if these 20,000 members that we're currently with Aetna Better Health now have to be dispersed to the Medicare, the people who are still in the market, like they're going to be assigned and attributed, and B, how it affects my value-based care projections if I'm expecting to manage 85,000 lives. Now I'm going to be responsible for 150,000 lives or 120,000 lives, and how I adjust that accordingly. So as you mentioned with the joint operating committee meetings, it's where did these patients come from, and now I have to deal with them. So again, it's about forecasting and predicting when there's been a change, if a payer leaves the market and new members are assigned to the remaining payers in the market.
I love that question, and I hate to say that it's not part of the implementation criteria, only because when you think about FHIR and standards development in general, right, it's taking real-world problems and creating a way to seamlessly exchange that information, to exchange it in a way where you and I can speak the same language regarding the data that's expected. And I love your question because it's so important when it comes to ops, staffing, everything, yes, but that is more of a like operational value-based care question, right? And something that health systems and providers should always think about, especially this year, right? We saw a lot of payers leave specific markets. Those lives were reallocated and so forth, but it is something, unfortunately, that this specific implementation guide does not tackle. For a lot of reasons, but also it's a massive complexity on the back end, right? And how a payer attributes or assigns providers, how they onboard them, and all of that stuff. Yeah.
It is a mystery process of member attribution on the payer side, right? Nobody knows how it works. But that being said, let me add on to something. That is definitely our hope, using this attribution process to build a complete roster management process, right? This is what is feeding into innovation portfolio. What that means is we want to build that roster management process. If the new members are automatically attributed to a health system or a provider, providers, they should have some kind of an essay in saying that we do accept this process. So as of right now, that is not handled here. But definitely, do we want to be? It is a path to get there is through this process.
Dr. Rucker, before we're shunned, do you want to ask? The question was, is there any tie-in between member attribution and eligibility checks? I can see how there could be if it was real time, but right now in the way that the process works is that it's bulk data and it's tied to a group, and that group is typically identified or represents a specific value-based care contract, right? So not right now, but could it in theory? Instead of a push, you go in and you have a query and you say, hey, I know this member was part of this value-based care contract. Can you give me their coverage resource? That's all I need. That seems simple enough, right? But it's just not that we know, no payer is supporting that, unless you feel differently.
No, not as of right now, and that's why I think so it would be helpful for everybody to participate in this process, right? How can we make this IG a better process, right? So that's something can be looked into.
Yeah. But thank you all. Please feel free to reach out.